You don't really notice the cracks while you're living inside them. Not at first. It starts quietly. A feeling. A moment. A realization that something you were told your entire life doesn't quite feel like yours. And for some, that moment comes in their teenage years, when the pressure to believe, to obey, to follow, suddenly feels heavier than ever. There was a time when everything seemed simple. Faith, family, routine. But behind that image, there were struggles no one was talking about. Trying to take on beliefs that never truly felt personal. Trying to fit into a mold that was already built long before you had a say in it. And in the middle of all that, small acts of kindness felt huge. Someone checking in. Someone saying, "I love you" first thing in the morning. Someone making you feel seen in a world where everything felt controlled. Those moments mattered more than anyone realized. But even those moments couldn't stop what was coming. Because while things looked normal on the surface, something much deeper was shifting behind the scenes. When Joseph came back from college, people say he came back different. Intense. Focused. Completely consumed. And that energy, it didn't just stay with him. It spread. It influenced the younger boys, shaped their thinking, and reinforced a system that was already under pressure. And then, everything started to unravel. What people are only just starting to understand now is how serious things have become. Joseph has now signed documents making it clear he won't even show up for certain court hearings. He's stepping back, staying away, avoiding the process wherever he can. The only appearance he can't escape? His arraignment, now pushed to May 19th. That delay alone has raised questions. Evidence moving between states. Prosecutors taking their time. And in the middle of it all, Joseph and his legal team pushing a narrative, acting like he's the one being wronged. But that's only one part of the story, because there's another case, one that's far more disturbing, and far more personal. A case involving not just Joseph, but Kendra, and their own children. And this is where things take a much darker turn. Officially, the court has remained silent. No details, no transparency, nothing for the public. But behind closed doors, people close to both families have been talking. And what they are saying paints a picture that's hard to ignore. To understand how it got this bad, you have to go back years. Back to 2020, when tensions between the families first started boiling over. At the time, it was easy to blame it on surface-level disagreements. COVID, different opinions, different approaches. But that wasn't the real issue. The real issue was control. There was a document, an agreement, one that came with money, but also came with silence. Sign it, and you get paid. Refuse, and you're cut off. No speaking out. No criticism. No breaking the image. And when that document was shared around, something unexpected happened. Not everyone agreed with it. Some people read it, and saw right through it. Concerns were raised. Questions were asked. And instead of bringing the family closer together, it created a divide that would only get worse over time. Because once you start questioning control, it's very hard to go back. Kendra herself was already struggling. She never wanted the spotlight, never wanted the cameras. And when she saw what she was being asked to sign, it didn't sit right with her either. Neither did her family. They warned her. They pushed back. But by then, things were already in motion. And then came the personal conflicts, relationships strained, tensions rising, attempts to connect families through marriage, falling apart, rejection, resentment, and suddenly, the closeness that once existed started to dissipate. Even practical things changed. Rent increased, living situations shifted, and what once felt like a united front turned into distance. At the same time, deeper differences were becoming impossible to ignore. Different beliefs, different teachings, different ways of living. And those differences only made everything more complicated. Then came the property. What started as a simple plan, build a home, maybe sell it, turned into something else entirely. Kendra didn't even want to live there at first. But plans changed, and her family stepped in to help, putting in time, effort, and energy to make it livable. But even that didn't bring stability. More land, more construction, more projects, loans being taken out, new builds going up, including a rental property meant to bring in income. But that too ran into problems. Accidents, damage, safety concerns, and it didn't stop there. There were growing concerns about how these homes were being built in the first place. Reports of poor conditions, structural issues, even mold. Serious enough that it began affecting health. Kendra and the children reportedly becoming sick, forced to move just to get away from it. But while all of this was happening, Kendra was dealing with something else entirely: pressure, relentless, exhausting pressure. 4 children in 5 years. Difficult pregnancies, little support, and a lifestyle that demanded more, no matter how much she was already carrying. She came from a background where families worked together, where responsibilities were shared. But now, she was facing it mostly alone, and the expectations didn't stop. More children, more responsibility, more sacrifice, even when it was clear she was already overwhelmed. And that's when the situation crossed a line, because it wasn't just about stress anymore. It wasn't just about disagreement or pressure. It became about the children. Concerns started surfacing. Serious ones. About the environment they were living in. About their care. About their well-being. Reports describing conditions that raised alarms. Questions about education, cleanliness, safety, and eventually, authorities stepped in. What happened next changed everything. The children were removed, taken out of that environment and placed into foster care. And according to those familiar with the situation, they are now in a more stable, structured place. A place where routines exist, where care is consistent. Meanwhile, Joseph is facing restrictions. Strict ones. He cannot be alone with the children. Not without supervision. And for Kendra, the path forward isn't simple. If she wants to regain custody, there are conditions, programs, requirements, and possibly one of the hardest decisions of all: walking away, because the people closest to her, the ones who have seen everything unfold, are urging her to start over, to rebuild, to create a life where her children can truly be safe and supported. And when you step back and look at everything, it's not just one moment that led here. It's years of pressure, control, silence, conflict, and choices that slowly built up until there was no way to ignore it anymore. What once looked like a perfect image has completely fallen apart. And now, the only question left is, it always starts with something small, something easy to ignore, that a quiet feeling that something isn't right. A moment where you pause and think, why does this feel so forced? But when you grow up in an environment where everything is already decided for you, you don't question it out loud. You push it down. You tell yourself it's normal, that that's exactly how it was during those early years, that on the outside, everything looked stable. Faith was strong. Family bonds seemed unbreakable. There was structure, routine, expectations, all the things that were supposed to build a perfect life. But behind that image, there were cracks forming. And those cracks started showing during the teenage years, when the pressure to accept everything without question became harder to carry. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't anger. It was confusion, trying to take on beliefs that never truly felt personal, trying to live up to standards that didn't come from within. And in that space, even the smallest kindness felt overwhelming. A simple "how are you?" A quiet "I care about you." Someone stepping in like an older brother, offering support without judgment. Those moments didn't just matter, they meant everything. Because when you feel lost, being seen can change everything. But while those moments gave comfort, they couldn't stop the bigger shift that was coming, because something had already started changing. When Joseph came back from college, people noticed it immediately. He wasn't the same. There was an intensity about him, a kind of fire that didn't just stay contained. It spread. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, it influenced the younger boys around him. It reinforced ideas, strengthened beliefs, and pushed an already strict environment even further. At first, it seemed like passion. But over time, it started to feel like pressure, and pressure has a way of building quietly until it reaches a breaking point. Now, fast forward to today, and everything feels different. Because the same person who once stood as an example is now at the center of something much darker. Joseph has officially signed documents making it clear he won't attend certain court hearings. Not because he can't, but because he's choosing not to. It's a move that raises more questions than answers. Why step back unless there's something to avoid? Why distance yourself unless the situation is bigger than what's being shown? The only appearance he hasn't been able to step away from is his arraignment, now pushed to May 19th. Even that delay feels heavy. Time being bought, evidence moving between states, legal teams working behind the scenes, And while all of this is happening, there's a narrative being pushed. Point one, where he's the victim. Point one, where the delay becomes an excuse. Where the lack of immediate charges is turned into doubt. Where the story is flipped, just enough to make people question what's really going on. But the truth is, delays like this don't happen without reason. And whatever that reason is, it's serious. Because this isn't just about one case anymore. There's another situation unfolding at the same time, one that hasn't been openly discussed, one that's being kept quiet, but one that could be even more disturbing than anything else. It involves Kendra. It involves their children, and it's happening behind closed doors. Officially, there's silence. No public updates. No detailed statements. Nothing that gives a clear picture of what's really going on. But silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. In fact, it usually means the opposite, because when people close to the situation start talking, a very different story begins to emerge, and the more you hear, the harder it becomes to ignore, because what's being described isn't just a rough patch. It's not just stress or family disagreements. It's something deeper. Something that's been building for years. To really understand it, you have to go back. Back to the moment where everything first started to fall apart. Back to 2020. The time, it didn't seem like a big deal. People assumed the tension between the families was just about surface-level disagreements. Different views. Different reactions to the world around them. It was easy to label it as temporary, but that wasn't the real issue. The real issue was something far more controlled, far more calculated, because behind the scenes, decisions were being made that would change everything. There was an agreement. A document. Something that came with a promise of money, but also came with a condition. Silence. No speaking out. No questioning authority. No breaking the image that had been carefully built over the years. You either signed it, or you stepped away from everything. And when that document started circulating, it didn't land the way it was expected to, because not everyone was willing to accept it without question. Some people read it, and immediately saw the problem. They saw control where others saw opportunity. They saw restriction where others saw security. And once that realization hit, it couldn't be undone. Because once you see something for what it really is, you can't pretend it's something else. And that moment, that realization, was the beginning of everything changing. What looked like a strong, united family was already starting to break from within, and no one outside had any idea how bad it was about to get.